This is the Out of Time Film Podcast, where your hosts Tom and John discuss everything from blockbuster films to TV and games like there's no tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to the Out of Time Film Podcast. My name is Tom and as always I'm joined with my co-host John.
Hello.
And this week we are talking about Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It took us a while, but we are here.
Yeah, it took us a while to get here. It's quite funny how we got here as well. After we've done the Scott Pilgrim episode, which you can look back into, we were like, oh, we're so excited for this animated thing. It's going to be cool. And we looked at the trailers or the clips and we were like, oh, okay, is it going to be different? And I actually thought it was going to be a one-to-one adaptation, I guess, from the graphic novels or from the movie itself. And we finally got here. I'm really excited to talk about. It just completely blew my mind. What about you, Tom?
I'm in exactly the same boat. I think one of the reasons why it took us so long to actually cover this show, not only because we've had other things that we've been covering, but I think a big part of it is because it did kind of look like it was just going to be the same thing. Like, why would you want that? Like, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that they're remaking it, the idea that they're bringing back the cast is exciting, but especially on that first episode, you watch it and you're just like, oh. This is just what it's going to be. But then I think the great thing about this show is that it actually twists it and it does something completely different. It's a reboot that brings something new to the table. In the last 10 years, 15 years, we've had so many reboots. It's been ridiculous. This year alone, we have Mean Girls and The Color Purple already. And I'm sure there are other ones that are coming out. And you know, I saw both of those films. I liked them enough, but neither of them really brought anything new to the table. They had nothing new to say. But this show, it's constantly in conversation with the concept of a reboot. Like, what do we ask from a reboot? What do we expect of them? It does all that, what kind of winking to the original in some pretty fun and like wacky ways. But it also kind of serves as its own thing. It doesn't have to be the way that this show twists the original story is really fascinating, and it does things that I can't imagine now watching the film without then wanting to watch the show, because they kind of work so perfectly together. There's even an element of this story that is kind of like the sequel that kind of like gives us a look into the future. Basically, this show does everything you didn't know you wanted it to, and it's better than we ever deserved.
We were like, damn, we should have watched this earlier. It's just impressed me of how the show was just so insane, but also just handled emotional beats. It's really tricky because it's 8 episodes and 26 minutes each. It just handled everything so well, and it just had the energy from the movie. I haven't read the graphic novels itself, but I'm pretty sure the graphic novels might have that same energy. This is something that I was not expecting for my 2024 year to watch. We should have watched this earlier.
I'm really glad that we've had a week with nothing new coming out, because it meant that we could actually cover this. So
Yes.
that's really lucky. So full spoilers ahead from this point on. Briefly explain the plot for those who don't know.
After meeting the woman of his dreams, a charming musician finds himself contending with an army of her ex-boyfriends. And that's the show itself.
Oh, okay, that's the full thing. Okay, right. So let's go a bit into detail. What was it about this show that you liked so much?
I loved how, from the very end of the first episode, I was like, okay, where's this going? This is going to be like the same. But then it just flipped from what you thought was going to happen. And it just completely shocked me, because in the very end of the first episode, Scott Pilgrim loses a fight against Matthew Patel. And I was like, wait, what? Where's this going? I was just so excited to see where it was going. And we got to like explore different concepts of the 7 evil exes as well, like of Lucas Lee, Matthew Patel. What I really loved as well was like, this is like Ramona's side of the story, because in, you know, Scott Pilgrim film and the graphic novels, they follow Scott's side of the story, you know, what he's going through and fighting against the 7 evil exes. And I love that, you know, we got to see more of Ramona and more of her backstories, which was so emotional, and it just added a lot of backstories to the 7 evil exes, to why they're evil. And it just makes you want to watch the first movie, and it's like they add so much context. This just adds so much breadth of the world building and just makes it so alive, but also chaotic. And I just loved that it was the energy that kept going throughout the show, and it just felt so on point. It just kept going and going and going, rolling with punches, and the animation was insane. I just loved everything about it. It's just so crazy, and it just explored every piece of the character like they ignored in the movie, and just thought, okay, how about we explore this character and what are the possibilities? I just loved how it was kind of like an Elseworld story from DC's type of thing, like they write a completely different world, but in here it just felt like this mirror to Scott Pilgrim. It was just so refreshing, and it was just so chaotic, and I loved it.
I agree with everything that you say. I think it's really interesting that in the original story, every character is defined by somebody else. All the exes are defined by Ramona. Ramona is defined by Scott and Gideon and all of her exes. Scott himself is defined by Ramona. Like characters, they don't really stand on their own. And that's not a criticism. But I think for this reboot, again, if it had just done that again, that would have been really boring. So what this really interesting thing that this does is it gives everybody a thing to stand on their own. This is very much Ramona's story. We actually find out, like, in terms of Ramona, who is she when not the girl that Scott wants to be with, when not the person who has broken the hearts of all these different people? We find out that, like, she at the end becomes a stunt woman. Like, she has like her own like hopes and dreams and talents. The exes specifically, they are so different because they get more development and humanizations. They're not just vessels of anger and jealousy. We see kind of inside of them and see that they're broken and insecure people with voids inside of them, and they're always trying to feel whole. I mean, they're still bad people, but their behavior is more understandable. I think a lot of them, if not all of the exes, they get redeemed and they all get their chance to be good and to have that kind of catharsis. They all get to forgive Ramona and she gets a chance to apologize for her own choices. And I thought that was just a really, really, really interesting direction to take, because for these characters, they have their one thing and they stick to it. Like in the original, they are essentially caricatures of various different like character types, whether it be Todd as the band geek or as Matthew Patel as like the goth. I guess Roxy in a way is also a kind of goth. Lucas Lee is the like skater dude. Those are the realms they sit in, but we kind of build upon those basis in this show, and that's really cool because again, this is something that I didn't really know that I wanted, but now that I have it, I'm like, yeah, no, that really makes sense. And the fact that they have all of this written by the original creator of the show, Brian Lee O'Malley, bringing him back and getting all of this stuff is really, really great. Like, just to see Ramona stand on her own to defend herself and to see all these different characters go in completely unexpected directions. What does it look like when Matthew Patel is the one who wins the fight at the beginning? He kind of gets this god complex on himself, but then it turns out that like he doesn't want all this power, he just wants to sing on Broadway. And so like I think it's brilliant because it really just it explores them in really interesting ways, but it's still wacky, it's still really funny. I mean, some of the stuff reminds me a bit of BoJack Horseman, like the young Neil plot line where he finds this screenplay that he thinks he's written, and then it just gets made into a motion picture, and he's just there on his little like golf buggy in the film studio, just like, I don't actually really know what's going on, but I'm just like rolling with it. It's brilliant, and it's all like subversions of expectations that feel really fresh.
Yeah, and I loved the small moments in the show that just subvert character dynamics. So one of my favorite moments is when Kim and Knives play the bass and Kim plays the drums, and then they just reconnect with music. And it was like they have this passion for music, and there was sparks for music, and I just loved that. That was just so cool to see that they explore, characters in small ways but in massive ways as well. And like we find out, the older Scott was like completely trying to stop the younger Scott to not be with Ramona, and it just like explores that other side to Scott, that future and beyond that as well. And it just made it so self-realized in a way of like how we look at characters from the movie, and it's like, oh, they're not good. I mean, Scott is a bad person from the movie as well, but I really like that there was this really nice pace of change for Scott, throughout the show. I mean, it's not a huge change, but it's something that he fully realizes, and then he looks at older Scott as something that, oh, I'm not going to be like that. There is something that showing Scott can change. And the music was so
Yeah.
good. The opening, banger.
Incredible, like taking, because obviously the books were always mangas, and obviously like the film takes a lot of influence from that, but also a lot of influence from video games. And so to kind of take this and to bring it back to its Japanese roots by having it animated by a Japanese studio and having the opening be full anime, and every time that bass riff
yeah.
would start for the opening. Brilliant. Like, we talked about how in the film Launchpad McQuack, the opening sequence is like the most exciting thing ever. They somehow take that and then like infuse it with this kind of like anime influence and make it just as exciting, but for every single
Yeah.
episode. Fantastic. And I really like what you're saying about like the concept of Knives finding music. Like, again, who is Knives irrespective of Scott? There's this idea of like finding sparks, like whether it be the sparks in a relationship or sparks in something that you're passionate about. Everyone gets to explore that a little bit. Scott Pilgrim, in many ways, has always been about the future, the choices that we make that make us different than who we were in the past. Whether Scott is, as Ramona says in the film, another evil ex waiting to happen, or whether any of the exes would have ever had a future with Ramona, whether she has a future, whether she will run from it. It's all kind of wrapped up in that. So for the show to come down to literally Scott going into the future, meeting his future self, and then his future self fighting everyone. Like,
Oh,
they're
that
all
was
just
so
fighting.
cool.
The concept of
It was
it's
so cool.
brilliant. And Ramona becoming one with her future and present self, being able to think about the present and the future all together is, again, such an interesting direction to take that I didn't know I wanted. And now I'm like, of course, how could it not have done that?
Everyone versus Scott Pilgrim. That was so cool. And I loved the video game that the show was influenced by, like maybe perhaps Street Fighter. I loved how everyone was accepting for this like Street Fighter type fight against each other. One of my favorite moments was every, like Ramona Flowers versus Roxy fight.
Yes.
It's like that voice. It's just like, oh, it's gonna be so cool. And I just loved how they did that every time. One of my favorite moments as well was it was in the documentary episode. Yeah, it was in the
Oh my
documentary
God.
episode. Wells, Stun Doubles versus Ramona Flowers. And then as soon as he's like, fight, the cameraman was like, who said that? who said the fight? who announced it? And then the answer was like, nothing. I love it. It's just, I just love how it's just so self-realized. It's like, what is going on? What is happening? And I just love how everyone just accepts it. It's like, okay, cool, we'll fight each other then.
And quite a lot of the episodes as well kind of like make that comment on different levels of media consumption. Like, as you say, the episode where it's all through the lens of a documentary is really cool. The episode in the video store, they have a fight scene that goes through all different film genres, and they kind of talk about physical media dying because of streaming, and like the ending being in a theater. It's really interesting because it talks about these different ways that we consume stories, and like setting it on a film set or setting it in a theater. It really kind of is constantly making you think about what you wanted from the show and what you want from any kind of adaptation, and pushing it. Like, we see Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, the film that young Neil has written, and it looks just to be like a less interesting version of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the film. And so it's like, again, I'm so in awe of the fact that they were constantly at every level, while being funny, while being wacky, they're commenting on all these different ways. I love the scene where Lucas Lee fights all of the paparazzi. There's this brilliant ongoing joke that the paparazzi are like ninjas, just hiding in random places, and they're just like darting out of the shadows, and like, they all like confront him in his trailer, and he has to like, it's really great stuff, just like all just commenting on the landscape and the media. I'm just incredulous as to how Netflix allowed this to happen as well, because a lot of it is actually putting the middle finger up at Netflix and being like, yeah, things are better without you, like physical media is the way forward. And I really hope this gets a physical release, because
Oh
I
my
would
God,
love to
yes.
own this. So much potential for limited
It'll be
edition
so
steelbooks.
cool.
Like, come on now.
Netflix, if you're listening, please do release like a physical version for this.
Something tell me that Netflix isn't listening.
Netflix, please, I'm on my knees, please. I gotta add it to my anime collection, please.
Well, Disney Plus are doing these limited edition steelbooks for a load of their shows.
Oh yeah.
And Netflix used to make physical versions of their things. So, I really hope that they get back to that, because
Yeah.
there is literally no drawbacks. It's literally exclusively only good things. The rise of streaming and the decline of physical is a real issue, in my opinion, especially when studios can just
It's
delete
depressing.
shows and films. Like Willow. We never covered Willow on the pod. I wish we did, because Willow was fantastic and they cut it. It's gone forever. What if they decided to delete Andor?
Don't say that. Don't say that,
Well,
Tom. We
now
can't lose
have-
peak. We can't lose peak. Come on, please.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I'm sorry. I didn't. I didn't mean to frighten you like that.
Oh my god.
But
I was about to have a panic attack. Oh my god.
but we now have the Blu-ray, right? So like,
Oh yeah.
if they did delete Andor, God forbid, we'd be okay to some degree because we have that. So like, yeah, I must say, as great as this show was, and as necessary as it is for the first episode to be as it is, I did struggle with that first episode. I can't
Yes,
lie.
same.
And I was watching it and I was like, oh God, I have to watch 8 of these. In some ways, that's brilliant. That's genius. That's exactly like that's perfect. In all honesty, I was very tired by the first episode and do think that would turn a lot of viewers off. Like, this show really relies on your prior knowledge and subverting your expectations at the start. And
Yes.
I don't think it will be nearly as exciting if you don't know or if you're not familiar with the original text. Like, it really does start off slow in a good way and a bad way. So I do have to say that it didn't quite grip me until episode 2. And in honesty, a lot of viewers will have turned off at that point. I don't really know if that was the right decision, but it definitely was, I think, an interesting one to make.
Yeah, I agree. There are shows that don't exactly pull you in, like for the first episode, maybe, and it becomes an incredible show without you knowing. It's like, I didn't expect this. There'll be like shows that once you get to episode 4, you feel like, what is the point of this? Nothing is really pulling me in. That was like the same case for this. I was just like, is it going to be different for the first episode? But I'm glad that they made it kind of secret about like, this is going to be completely different. That was something that I appreciate because then I watched the show maybe in one sitting, I think, and it was just so cool to watch this without anything knowing and what happens, and it was just so cool to see the characters again. And I loved the voice acting for the show. I was really worried about like for the first clip I seen, it was like with Scott and Julie talking about Ramona. I was like, well, that's the same kind of scene from the movie or the graphic novels, and it was just like, okay, what was gonna do? But the voice acting was so good. I loved it. I can tell that actors had so much fun doing this. But one of my favorite moments, it was from Chris Evans, and it was like about the news. The way he was like, my God. Like, he had so much horror in that voice when he found out the news, and it was like the paparazzi that came after him. But great moments in the show that just kept me upbeat and just kept me going, and it was just so cool just to watch this.
Yeah, I think that it makes sense that the marketing was a bit disappointing because they wanted to keep this secret. And so, like, yeah, those early clips they released were kind of like, oh no, is this just like a really sourceless version of what we've already seen? Again, that's kind of the point. And so that, I think that really does work that they did all that. I do have an email here from Samuel
Oh,
Masson who
hey.
says, hello, Tom and John. Scott Pilgrim Takes
Hello.
Off was an excellent welcome back to this series/world. Having seen the film a couple of times and having a good time with it, the series had a bit more to entice me. The anime style was very different from the anime series I've watched before, but it was impressive. The bold colors and effects created a blend of animation that was easy to look at and felt very familiar in a sense, even though I haven't watched a show like it. It did seem like the pages of manga come to life. Could not fault that. Seeing the X's have more story and development was interesting to see. In the film, I felt that some got more focus than others, but here, they all got something which was great to see and their own moments to shine. Special mention to Todd and Roxy. I love that the original cast came back for this. It helps the series feel part of the world more. Even though it is still the same story, it helps it feels more familiar. Plus, Mary Elizabeth Winstead is always a win. I really
Yes.
enjoyed this series and will
Yes.
definitely need to watch this again. Even maybe want to go back and watch the film, so extra points for that. 8 out of 10. P.S. We need a full Sex Bob-omb album. Thanks for the pod, gents. Take
Yeah.
care. Sam.
I also want a musical from
Oh, yeah.
Scott
That's
Pilgrim.
that's
I
the
want
next step.
that. That
That's
was
the
so
next
cool.
step. Yes.
Ah,
A
yeah.
musical starring Matthew Patel. That's where we must go from this.
Oh, that'd be so cool, though. Yeah, I agree that the Seven Evil Exes got a moment to shine, which the film didn't really handle, and it just like kind of lost somewhere with the emotional beats. But this one, it just went beyond that, and I'm glad that they did.
I like how Todd and Wallace have this kind of like romance where Todd falls head over heels in love with Wallace. They kind of take the idea of Wallace as this ultra seductive guy to the next level. Like with Jimmy in the film, it's like that, but like, taken to like he just kind of walks onto a film set and he's given like one of the lead roles just because.
I'm just glad that they just explored everything and, just to not forget about the characters that kind of made Scott Pilgrim, but also Ramona as well. So, yeah, a really good balance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what Sam says about like, the animation and the colors, it all feels in line with the original comic, with the film. They all
Yes.
work so well together. Again, I just think that this would just make such a brilliant comeback. I swear, release a box set with the film and the show because damn, like I just can't imagine watching one. Like I don't even know if the film is on Netflix here in the UK, but it just feels like such a fun evening to watch the film and then to watch the show and really absorb all of this world. And you know, after this, I must say, I would see more. Like, I don't know, like, whatever they want to do, I do think the idea of a musical or the idea of something else, like, you know, we've done our comic series, we've done our conventional live action film, we've done our anime. Let's explore different mediums. Let's explore different, like, let's do Scott Pilgrim, but it's stop motion animation. And again, a whole different, like, exploration of, like, this story, this world. There's just so many places to go. And if in 10 years they decide they're going to do another one, you know, bring back the cast again and just, like, try something new with it, I'm so sold.
Yeah, come on, let's explore something with this. It was so cool to watch.
I mean, this genuinely has to be one of the best TV shows I've seen in a long time. You know, we've covered some pretty good shows on here in the past, but this is just everything that I wanted and that I didn't know that I want. I'm just brilliant. What are you going to give Scott Pilgrim Takes Off?
You know what? I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 because it was one of the best things I've seen in a while. I agree with that. It was just refreshing. It was so fun. It was, you know, ecstatic.
I'm nodding profusely. I agree. 9 out of 10. Just absolutely knocked it out of the park. Home run. Brilliant.
Home run.
Also, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost had a cameo.
Oh,
and that
yeah.
was delightful.
That was so cool. And did you see that the name Edgar Wrong?
Edgar Wrong, yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. This is just like there are so many layers of enjoyment of this show. Like casual fans and like really kind of like passionate fans will all love it. Like I've heard only brilliant things about this, and I definitely, more people should watch it.
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
amazing.
Go watch it. It's so much fun.
Nothing that we could say could be anything near as close to how good it is. Thank you everybody for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, you can like and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, you can follow and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worthy. And next week, I'm so sorry. Next week is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
No.
We genuinely considered not doing this. We genuinely, I remember I texted you, John, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't. But I believe. I believe in this film to make a good video. I don't believe in the film to be good. I believe it's going to be a fun time to talk about it afterwards.
True. Unless it's going to be like a masterpiece that just flipped.
I can't even comprehend that. Like I have no words for that. If it's a masterpiece, I don't know what I'll do. I'll eat my hat. I don't even have a hat, but I'll eat it. Like wow.
Oh, just like an imaginary hat, like and just like
yes,
it's a masterpiece, and you start eating it like throughout the
it
podcast.
It really won't be. It really won't be a masterpiece. I swear. But you can send us an email ourtimefilmpod@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on Ghostbusters Frozen Empire and ask us any questions. We'll answer it right here on the podcast next week. John, why aren't you more excited? Why aren't you elated to see this film?
Because Ghostbusters. Anyway,
who are you gonna call?
Ghostbusters. Yes, you can follow us on Instagram at OutOfTimeFilmPod to see our incredible thumbnails from Zane Asphalt, on Twitter for more thoughts from Tom, and TikTok to see edited clips, which are all also on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And you can find links to that all in the description below. Thanks to L. James Mayer for the excellent theme, and Ronan Phillips for vocals as always. I think that's everything. Yeah.
It is indeed.
Take what you're given.
Give nothing back.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.